Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Retro Muscle. Today's episode is going to be a fun one because not only will it be a competition recap, but it'll also include some rare footage from the night of the show. Before we begin, though, I'd like to acknowledge the original production company that covered the show, and they were called Video Action. They were a small video production company based out of Jersey City, New Jersey, and they opened up operations in December of 1986 and would go on to cover many amateur athletes and competitions throughout the 80s and 90s. Okay, let's just get right into it. Today's competition recap will be of the 1989 NPC USA Championship. Now, I'm sure many of you out there already know this, but this was one of the few amateur competitions at the time that was a pro qualifier. Unlike today, you had to not only win your class, but you had to get the overall for pro status. Okay, so the 89 USA Championships were held on July 14th and 15th in Raleigh, North Carolina, and it was put on by promoter Dave Gillespie. Now, the first day was mixed pairs and the Women's Bodybuilding Championship, but for this video, we're going to only be covering the second night, which had the Men's Open Division. Okay, so it's Saturday, July 15th. The North Raleigh Hilton Hotel had over 100 competitors from across the nation represented at prejudging. By the night show, the competition had been whittled down to the top 15 from each class, except for the bantamweights. According to all the magazines I used to find my information, the bantamweight class only had 14 competitors in the category. All right, let's get right into it. We'll start with the lightest category, the bantamweights. 14th place went to competitor J.C. Hayes, and unfortunately there is no footage of him. I checked all the magazines I could. There is no images, nothing. It looks like this guy skipped out. Okay, on to 13th, and that went to Ron Boudreau of Mount Clemens, Michigan. 12th place went to Chris Wagner, representing Hilton Head, North Carolina. 11th went to John Winterroud of Great Falls, Montana. Okay, on to 10th place, we had William Marin from Elmhurst, New York. 9th place was Dave Fuji from Aurora, Colorado. 8th place went to James Rutledge of Belton, South Carolina. 7th place went to James Richards from Glassboro, New Jersey. 6th went to Matt Alloy of Anaheim, California. Okay, now we're at our top 5 of the bantamweight category. Coming in 5th place was Carl Laperoux of Yuma, Louisiana. According to an article I read, he weighed 141.5 pounds and stood at 5'3". He had recently won his class in a few big shows in his area, like the Louisiana State, but unfortunately showed up a bit soft in the midsection. Okay, coming in 4th place was Daniel Wright from Ford, Virginia. At 5'4" and weighing 140 pounds, Wright balanced bodybuilding with his full-time job as a UPS driver. And I really got to give it to this guy because with just 4 years, he not only won the Virginia State, but he also won the 89 Eastern Classic as a lightweight. For this show, he dropped weight to qualify as a bantam, and I thought Daniel looked real good and had a great posing routine, but according to Jerry Brainham's article, he needed to improve his legs and lower back. Okay, coming in 3rd place was Chalmers Brown of Rancho Cordova, California. Standing at 5'4" and 140 pounds, Brown had recently won his class at the last California Championships. And along with his great back, he had a very entertaining posing routine, but his only downside were his legs. I think if they were just a little bit bigger, he would have definitely placed higher. On to 2nd place, and that went to Bob Lefevre of Columbus, Georgia. At the time, Lefevre was a PhD candidate in human movement at Auburn University, and along with balancing schoolwork, he had won the Southern Classic a year prior and placed 13th at Nationals. At 5'5" and 140 pounds, Lefevre was ripped but lacked the size that he needed for first place. Okay, coming in 1st place in the bantamweight category, and that went to Earl Snyder of Phillipsburg, Pennsylvania. Standing at 5'2" and 141 pounds, Snyder, a former Mr. Pennsylvania and full-time corrections officer, nearly swept the entire class with an 8 out of 9 first-place votes from the judges. And I can't disagree. Even though he's one of the more shorter guys in the class, he definitely had the mass and condition to take it. Okay, on to the lightweights. Let's start with 15th place, and that went to Mike Broadway of Linwood, North Carolina. 14th place was Mark George from Albuquerque, New Mexico. 13th place went to Richard Zarnicki of Melrose Park, Illinois. In 12th, we had Rob Crawford of Memphis, Tennessee. In 11th place, we had Robert Enriquez of Miami, Florida. Okay, coming in 10th place was Bob Caccaro of Tulsa, Oklahoma. In 9th was Jay Matlock representing Dallas, Texas. Coming in 8th was Ken Jones from Brooklyn, New York. And just a side note that I have to highlight, this guy had a very, I guess you'd just say, unique posing routine. Anyway, on to 7th place, we had Walter Bloom of Warminster, Pennsylvania. In 6th, we had Mark Murray of Topeka, Kansas. All right, now on to our top 5 competitors of the lightweights. Coming in 5th, we had Steve Worth of Baltimore, Maryland. Standing at 5'4" and weighing 152 pounds, Steve was a full-time warehouse supervisor that had been training for 10 years. Previously, he had won the Maryland state title as a middleweight 2 years in a row, but chose to drop down for this competition. He had done this at previous shows like the Novice America and Mid-Atlantic, but unfortunately not as much luck here. Okay, let's move on to 4th place, and that went to Derek Briggs of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Standing at 5'6" and 154.5 pounds, Briggs was representing Gold's Gym Tulsa and had been training for 5 years. Along with his day job as a sales manager for a graphics company, Briggs was also an NPC athlete rep in his area. Anyway, I think this guy had overall great symmetry and balance for a lightweight with a lot of potential for the future. Okay, let's move on to 3rd place. Coming in 3rd, we had Pete Zanos from Phoenix, Arizona. Zanos stood at 5'7", weighing 151 pounds, and he had made huge improvements from his previous showing at the USA's where he placed 12th in this class. But although he had great symmetry, he was just lacking the size for a higher placing. All right, coming in 2nd place, we had the local favorite, Gerard Matthews of Charlotte, North Carolina. Standing at 5'7", weighing 150 pounds, Matthews was representing King's Gym out of Charlotte. And having only trained for just 4 years, Gerard won some big shows like the North and South Carolina title while balancing work as a machine shop supervisor. I think this guy has a great physique overall, but he's just lacking the density that the first place winner was carrying. Okay, finally, coming in 1st place of the lightweight category, we have gym owner Rob Frangen of Dumont, New Jersey. Standing at 5'3" and weighing 154.5 pounds, Rob had been training for 8 years, but only started competing 2.5 years earlier. In just that small time, Rob went from placing 5th in this show a year prior to now a national contender. All right, let's now move on to our middleweight category. Coming in 15th place, we had James Hampton representing Hilton Head, South Carolina. In 14th was James Walker of Williamsburg, Virginia. In 13th, we had Johnny Schamberger of Hyattsville, Maryland. Coming in 12th place was Brian Anthony of Pickens, South Carolina. All right, coming in 11th, we had Chet Thorne from Albuquerque, New Mexico. In the 10th place spot, we had Ivan Rivera from Kew Gardens, New York. Coming in 9th was Tim Diem of Leaditz, Pennsylvania. In 8th place, we had Charles Durr of Harvey, Illinois. Coming in 7th, we had Ron Slayton from Phoenix, Arizona. In 6th place was Leon Brown from Staten Island, New York. And I'd like to just point out that by this point in his career, Brown had been an active competitor for over 20 years in the amateur circuit. He truly is an inspiration, and he even continued to compete into the mid-2000s, so that's awesome. Anyway, let's go on to our top 5 of the middleweight category. In 5th place, we had one of the most entertaining competitors, not to mention one of the densest, and that was David Brown of San Diego, California. This 5'5" United States Marine came into the show weighing 176.5 pounds and won the crowd over with his singing posing routine. Along with his theatrics, David came in with a big back and huge legs, but in my opinion, he seemed to be carrying a little bit of water. I mean, he's leaking up there. But anyway, let's move on to 4th place, and that went to Brenton Acklese of Orlando, Florida. Standing at 5'8" and weighing 175 pounds, Brenton came into the show at 30 years old with only 4 years of training. Along with working at the Orlando airport, Brenton claimed the 1988 Florida Championship and placed 3rd at Junior Nationals. One of his highlights for sure are his arms, but overall he was a bit smooth. Okay, on to 3rd place, and that went to personal trainer Luke Tesvich of Marrero, Louisiana. Actually, the night prior, Tesvich and Debbie McKnight won the overall mixed pairs category. And according to some articles, if he would have shown up in that same exact shape as the night prior, he definitely would have taken the class. Okay, moving on to 2nd place, we had Gary Johnson of Metairie, Louisiana. Standing at 5'3" and 172 pounds, this 25-year-old had been training for 7 years and actually was training partners with Tesvich. At this time, he was working as a physical therapist, as well as snatching up some big Southern titles like Mr. Louisiana, the Southern Classic, and Greater Gulf States. For 5'3", Gary was pretty damn big with some impressive legs and a big back, but unfortunately he was lacking the overall balance that the judges were looking for and kind of seemed to be the theme of the night. And that went to our first place winner, 22-year-old rising star out of Houston, Texas, and that was John Sherman. Training out of Better Bodies of Texas and World Gym in Houston, Sherman was making a name for himself with only 4.5 years of training under his belt. Along with being a Texas state champ, Sherman had recently won the Collegiate Nationals while balancing work as a deputy sheriff. And there's no doubt the judges made the correct decision. Sherman here is massive and cut, and definitely, in my opinion, in the running for the overall title. Okay, now on to the most competitive class, the light heavyweights. Coming in 15th place, we had Tom Armour of Marietta, Georgia. In 14th place, we had Greg Clausen from Chicago, Illinois. In 13th place was Freedon Bujakli from Fair Lawn, New Jersey. Coming in 12th, we had Mike Grant of Franklin, Virginia. Coming in 11th place was Jeff Clay from Las Vegas, Nevada. All right, in 10th place was TJ Hewitt from Staten Island, New York. In 9th was Kevin McGowan of Nashua, New Hampshire. Coming in 8th was Jeff Lober of Troy, Ohio. In 7th place, we had Chuck Sano of Palos Hill, Illinois. 6th place went to Gordon Kearns, representing Los Angeles, California. Okay, and that brings us to our top 5 in the light heavyweight category. Coming in 5th place was Lee Haney's training partner, Tyrone Felder, or more famously known as Rope Man. Representing Lee's gym out of Atlanta, Georgia, Felder is a perfect example of how stacked this lineup was. At 34 years old, Felder came into the show looking real muscular and vascular, but according to some articles, his only weak points were his hamstring and calves. All right, now into 4th place, we had Mark Bates of Spartanburg, South Carolina. Standing at 5'8" and 190 pounds, Mark was representing Carolina Nautilus in Spartanburg and was sponsored by Richard Brown, the then president of Muscle Connection in Philadelphia and now president of World Physique Federation. And it's pretty funny because this just shows what a small world that bodybuilding is, because Richard Brown was actually both my mother and father's trainer back in the early 90s. And here's a photo that my dad took of Richard and the crew with my mom the morning of her show. Anyway, I just thought I had to share that. But back to Mark Bates. Looking at this guy's physique, it's hard to find a weak point. He's got a wide back, tiny waist, big arms, everything. But like I said, this was a pretty tough class. Okay, coming in 3rd place was the 12-year veteran Darryl Stafford of Atlanta, Georgia. And just a side note, he actually won this class at the 87 USAs. Standing at 5'7" and 198 pounds, Stafford looked really good and put on an excellent posing routine, but he must have really been upset with his dropping in place. Okay, on to 2nd place, we had Franco Santariello of Dunellen, New Jersey. Standing at 5'5" and 195 pounds, Franco brought not only size, but symmetry as well to the division. Now, going into the show, Franco was actually one of the favorites to win not only the class, but the overall title. But in the end, he came away with all second-place votes from the judges. All right, now on to the light heavyweight winner. Coming in 1st place out of Largo, Florida, was the 24-year-old Eddie Robinson. Standing at 5'6.5" and 213 pounds, from the back, Robinson looked ridiculous. I mean, he's got everything, and his hams and glutes are just insane. So it's no doubt that he took this class. Okay, now on to our final category, the heavyweights. Coming in 15th place was a young Milos Sarchev representing San Diego, California. In 14th, we had Bill Saligny of Maple Grove, Minnesota. Coming in 13th place, we had Scott Wells of Little Rock, Arkansas. In 12th was Jeff Prim from Rockford, Illinois. 11th place went to Mark Diamond from Framingham, Massachusetts. Coming in 10th place, we had crowd favorite Wayne Grady of Rocky Mountain, North Carolina. In 9th, we had Randy Droe from Convent Station, New Jersey. 8th place went to Deke Warner of Orlando, Florida. Coming in 7th place was Kyle Norris of Knoxville, Tennessee. Coming in 6th place, just short of the top 5, went to Powerhouse Gym owner Dean Caputo of Streetsboro, Ohio. I really think Caputo could have placed higher just on his condition alone. And actually, according to Bill Reynolds' article, had there been another judging panel, he would have. Okay, now on to the top 5 of the heavyweights. Coming in 5th place out of Salt Lake City, Utah, we had 6'1" DeMarco Blewett. Weighing 240 pounds, DeMarco moved up a place from the previous year with his great symmetry and proportions, but was a bit soft in the midsection. overall, it was a big improvement from what I read. Actually, the writers had said that he seemed to be a bit overtrained the year prior. Coming in fourth place was the really impressive and I personally think overlooked Aaron Baker of Venice, California. Standing at 5'8" and weighing 220 pounds, Baker brought it all. Size, shape, and he had an awesome posing routine. And it shows after 14 years of training that Baker was becoming a serious threat on the national circuit. A lot of people, including the writers from these magazines, thought he could have placed higher, but was just edged out by third place winner Rick Stevenson of San Diego, California. Rick stood at 5'8" and weighed 220 pounds with a very rugged physique that, it's very admirable. And I thought it was pretty cool at this time. He was also part owner of Gold's Gym in Pacific Beach. Now, according to some articles, this former California state champion's main weakness was his back, but it had made major improvements, but not enough to claim second place, which went to Bob Ciccarillo of Rochester, New York. Standing 6 foot tall and 220 pounds, this former deputy sheriff had made some major improvements from his junior national win in 1987. With over 10 years of training, Bob had a very good physique with broad shoulders, but could use more pec thickness, according to Brainham's article. Okay, now onto our heavyweight champion. Coming in first place, we had Johnny Morant of Parsippany, New Jersey. Representing Diamond Gym out of Maplewood, Johnny showed up in the best shape of his life, according to the magazines. And I can see why. Johnny had an incredibly wide back and a very dense chest. He actually got all of the first place votes. But according to some of the articles, Johnny looked ill at prejudging, and on top of the hot and muggy summer temperature, Morant's body was so depleted that he was sweating profusely on stage, and you can see it here. Luckily, though, he was able to make it through prejudging and the night show. All right, now that we have all of our class winners, it's time for the judges to make their final comparisons, calling out different shots for them to hit, and then our final pose down. Now, I don't know about you guys, but it's pretty clear to me that this show is between the bigger guys. Condition alone won't be enough because Morant and Robinson truly overwhelmed the rest of the competitors. But in the end, there can only be one, and the overall title of the 1989 Mr. USA Championship went to Eddie Robinson, and I completely agree. Although Morant is much bigger in stature and size, Robinson definitely had the more complete physique, in my opinion. Okay, that's going to do it for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share with your friends. But please stay tuned for upcoming episodes because I have so much footage from this video action tape, over 2.5 hours worth of posing routines and interviews, so stay on the lookout for that. And also, if you want some more classic bodybuilding content in the meantime, check out my Instagram page at RetroMuscleMax.